Hey guys, tonight we begin not with a ruin, not with the broken stones we know today, but with something brand new. It is China. The wall is young, freshly built, its stones sharp beneath your feet, and its watchtowers rising like teeth against the horizon. Soldiers pace its length, the mortar is still drying in places, and every climb feels endless. The world is tense, guarded. Every step is a reminder that this wall was not made for comfort. It was made to keep you out or keep you in. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that steady, low hum. Close your eyes and imagine the wind whipping across the stones as you begin the climb. Congratulations! You've just stepped onto the Great Wall of China, and it's brand new. You take your first step onto the slope and immediately regret the sandals. Not that you had much choice. Boots aren't exactly common issue here in 3rd century BC China, and the sharp stones beneath your feet are more committed to your suffering than any personal enemy you've ever known. The sun doesn't just shine, it presses down on your shoulders like a full-time tax collector who has finally found you at home. Dust clings to your skin in streaks of brown and red, mixing with sweat until you start to wonder if you're turning into some kind of half-baked clay figure. Ahead, the wall stretches not as the postcard, perfect serpent you've seen in modern photos, but as something half-born. Piles of stone, staggered slopes, wooden scaffolds that creak like they're one gust of wind away from becoming a funeral. Men trudge past carrying baskets of dirt, their faces lined with exhaustion and the kind of silence that only comes when complaint has already failed 100 times. Somewhere a soldier yells, not because anything in particular is wrong, but because yelling is cheaper than motivation. The air is heavy with the smell of earth freshly broken, mixed with smoke from fires where meals are being boiled into things that technically count as food, if you're generous with definitions. There's an edge of rot too, the scent of animals worked to death and buried shallow, and maybe of people who weren't given even that much courtesy. It's the kind of smell that lingers, clings, and announces, congratulations, you live in history now, and it stinks. Still, there's something magnetic about the place. The stones themselves seem to hum with a strange energy, as though you're standing inside the lungs of an empire mid-inhale. Everyone around you seems to know their role. Soldiers watching with suspicious eyes, laborers bowed under impossible loads, and officials scrawling notes about quotas nobody will ever meet. And then there's you, the uninvited time traveler, pretending you totally belong here while realizing that you wouldn't last a day. Which, incidentally, is exactly the point. Because climbing this wall, when it was new, isn't just about aching legs and sunburn. It's about surviving the politics baked into each stone. You look up at the endless climb, the steps uneven, the stones jutting at angles that would make modern architects cry into their ergonomic drafting chairs. And you think, yes, this is definitely going to kill me. Slowly, creatively, and with a good view. It's funny. Well, not funny, more like funny, in the way you laugh when you've lost cell service funny, that you came expecting some epic military monument and instead found what feels like the world's most sadistic hiking trail. You know those times you climb 2 flights of stairs today and feel like you deserve a medal. Multiply that by several thousand, add no water bottle, and throw in the possibility of someone pushing you off for sport. Welcome to the wall. But here's the thing. Even while you're sweating through your borrowed linen tunic, and wondering whether your sandal straps are plotting mutiny, there's still awe. The wall isn't yet the endless ribbon of stone snaking over mountaintops like in glossy travel magazines. It's raw, jagged, breathing. You can hear it in the hammer of picks against rock, in the grunt of oxen straining under loads, in the muttered prayers of men who know they'll never see home again. And somehow, standing in the middle of it, you realize that this isn't just construction. It's an act of sheer imperial stubbornness. A ruler so obsessed with keeping the world out that he decided to move mountains stone by stone. And if you're thinking this seems extreme, remember that in the modern world, people lose their minds if they're Fire is down for half an hour. Imagine living in a time where your king can command tens of thousands of you to spend your entire life stacking rocks on a hill just so he can sleep a little better at night. Perspective, right? The climb continues, each step scraping against your feet, each breath drier than the last. The workers give you side eyes that say, "You won't last." The soldiers smirk because they know you won't. And the stones beneath your sandals, they're already betting against you. And yet, you keep going. Because something tells you the view, when you finally drag yourself up to the ridge, might just be worth all this suffering. Of course, if you think this is bad, wait until the sun goes down and the wall turns from sweat-soaked nightmare into something far more unsettling. You keep climbing, though the word climb doesn't feel right. This isn't climbing so much as negotiating with gravity while it laughs in your face. Every step forward feels like a dare, and the wall has an excellent poker face. Workers shuffle past you, bent double with baskets so heavy they make your back ache just looking at them. Some carry stones larger than your head, wobbling under the weight, their knees threatening mutiny at any second. Others carry mud, hay and timber, all destined to be jammed into the growing bones of this beast. One man coughs so hard you're convinced something vital is about to come loose, but no one spares him a glance. Around here, coughing isn't a symptom. It's background music. And anyway, if he drops, someone else will just take his place. Efficient in a horrifying sort of way. You try not to stare, but it's hard not to wonder if you're watching someone's last few minutes play out, right there, on the stones you're walking. The sun climbs higher, which is terribly rude, since it's already hot enough to fry an egg on your forehead. Sweat drips down your back in tiny rivers, soaking your thin tunic until it sticks to you like second skin. The air wavers with heat, and even the birds have given up. They perch on half-built walls and stare at you like they're waiting for you to collapse. Probably taking bets too. If pigeons could laugh, you're pretty sure they would. You pause to catch your breath, leaning against a block of rough stone, its surface hot enough to remind you of an oven rack. Your chest heaves. Your heart feels like it's trying to hammer its way out, as if it also realized that signing up for this hike was a mistake. And somewhere deep in your modern brain, a thought arrives. This would be so much easier if there was a Starbucks at the top. But no, the only thing waiting at the summit is more wall. And maybe a soldier with an expression carved from the same stone, ready to shout at you for leaning where you shouldn't. Which, as it happens, he does. He barks something sharp, a language you can't quite wrap your head around, but you understand the tone well enough, move, so you do. Because even in ancient China, customer service is about fear. The path narrows, forcing you to shuffle single file behind a line of men dragging timbers up the incline. Their ropes cut into their shoulders, leaving angry red grooves, but none of them falter. They can't. You imagine this is what team building exercises would look like if they were designed by people who actively hated fun. Forget trust falls. Try hauling half a tree up a mountain in the blazing sun, while a soldier pokes you with a spear for encouragement. Builds character, right? And here's the strangest thing, despite the heat, the stench, the bone, deep exhaustion etched into every face. There's rhythm here. The wall moves like a living organism. Hammering, shouting, the scrape of stone on stone, the groan of ropes. Even your own ragged breathing slots into the beat, as if the wall has recruited you too, just another cog in its relentless appetite. You can feel the empire itself breathing through the cracks. Still, you can't help but notice that while everyone else looks like they belong, you stick out like spilled wine on silk. People glance at you with suspicion, maybe curiosity, maybe annoyance. You're clearly not carrying anything useful, not dressed like a soldier, not working like a laborer, which means you're just one more mouth, one more useless shadow on the stones. And in this place, being useless is the fastest way to become fertilizer. Your sandals slip on loose gravel, and for a heartbeat you pitch forward, arms flailing, stomach dropping. You catch yourself at the last second, scraping your palms on the stone. A nearby worker smirks. Not kindly either. The kind of smirk people wear when someone else confirms what they've always known. You're not going to make it. And he's probably right. You're sweating like a roast duck. your legs are trembling, and you're barely halfway up. And yet, despite the misery, there's something undeniably beautiful about it all. The view stretches wide valleys green and gold in the distance, mountains jagged against the horizon, rivers flashing silver in the sunlight. The wall itself cuts across the landscape like a scar, and you're standing inside that wound, part of the story carved into the earth. For a second, you forget the sweat, the stink, the fear, and just breathe it in. This empire is enormous, and this wall is its skin. Of course, the second doesn't last. Your stomach growls, dragging you back to reality. Judging by the smell drifting from a nearby campfire, today's menu is thin porridge with a side of disappointment. You'd kill for a sandwich. Or even just a crust of bread that wasn't trying to chip your teeth. You briefly consider whether chewing on your sandal might count as innovation. You keep climbing, legs burning, throat dry. The wall doesn't care if you're tired. It doesn't care if you're lost. It doesn't care if you're modern. It just keeps going, stone after stone after stone. And as the sun begins to tilt westward, shadows stretching long across the half-built battlements, a new thought creeps into your head. If this place feels harsh during the day, what's it going to feel like when night falls? By the time you drag yourself to what feels like the top, your legs are jelly. The kind of jelly that's been left out in the sun, melted and stomped on by oxen. You collapse against a newly laid stone block, chest heaving, lungs desperate, heart punching your ribs like a debt collector with a grudge. The workers don't even glance at you. They're too busy dumping their loads and heading back down for more. Watching them, you realize something horrifying. Climbing up once is a nightmare. But climbing up all day, every day, for years, that's not a nightmare. That's life here. The ridge gives you a view you'll never forget. The unfinished wall snakes across the mountains, disappearing into mist and reappearing miles away like some giant dragon half asleep. Valleys lie below, scattered with villages, smoke curling lazily from chimneys, the faint sound of dogs barking in the distance. From up here, the world feels huge, untamed, and far less civilized than your history books ever suggested. This is not the Great Wall as a monument. This is the Great Wall as a wound still bleeding. Soldiers patrol the ridges, spears gleaming in the fading sunlight. Their boots crunch on the stones, and every so often one stops to glare at the horizon, as if daring it to blink first. You wonder what they see: raiders, invaders, shadows of enemies real or imagined. Or maybe they just see boredom stretched across endless miles of rock. Being stationed here must be a dream if your dream is eating the same gruel forever, while watching farmers carry rocks uphill. A horn sounds in the distance, low and mournful, echoing across the ridges. It vibrates in your chest, making your heart stutter. Workers pause, shoulders sagging with relief, because the day's labor is finally ending. Or maybe because if it didn't end now, they'd simply keel over where they stood. The sun slumps toward the horizon, orange bleeding into purple, shadows deepening across the wall. Fires spark to life in camps below, little pinpricks of light scattered like fallen stars. The smell of smoke drifts upward, mingling with the ever-present stench of sweat and dust. A soldier nearby sharpens his blade, the screech of metal on stone slicing the quiet. Somewhere, a worker laughs, a short, tired bark of sound. But mostly the night feels heavy, as though the wall itself exhales once the day's madness subsides. You sit there, legs trembling, watching the last light drain away, and a new kind of unease settles over you. The wall in daylight is brutal, but at night it feels alive. The wind whistles through gaps in the stone, like voices whispering secrets you'd rather not hear. The shadows stretch long, turning scaffolds into looming figures, half-finished towers into monstrous silhouettes. Every creak, every rustle, every shifting sound feels amplified. You suddenly remember that this wall isn't just meant to keep people out. It's meant to keep people in. A chill crawls up your spine despite the lingering heat. The first stars prick the sky, cold and sharp, and you wonder how many men have died right where you're sitting. How many are buried beneath the stones you're leaning against? How many more will join them before this wall ever looks like the one you know from the postcards? The thought won't leave you, no matter how much you try to laugh it off. The workers retreat to their tents, soldiers pace their watch, and you sit, caught between exhaustion and unease, staring into the dark. And just when you think you've adjusted, a sound drifts across the stones. A long, low howl. Wolf. Maybe. Or maybe not. The men nearby shift uncomfortably, whispering words you can't understand, but you can read their faces well enough, whatever it is. They don't like it. You hug your knees, eyes scanning the shadows, and realize that climbing the wall during the day might have been survivable after all. But surviving the night, that's another story entirely. And if you think the climb was brutal, wait until you find out what it feels like to spend your first night on the wall, listening to things that don't belong in the dark. Night drops like a curtain, and with it comes a silence so thick you feel it pressing against your ears. The kind of silence that isn't really silence at all. It's just the absence of things you trust. No chatter of neighbors, no distant hum of cars, no glow of streetlights to assure you the world is still spinning. Here, the only glow comes from a handful of fire pits, flickering against the stone. Their flames twisting in the wind like nervous dancers. Shadows stretch across the unfinished battlements, long and thin, bending into shapes that look more alive than they should. The workers huddle in ragged tents at the base of the wall, too exhausted to do much more than collapse into the dust. The soldiers remain awake, pacing their watch with spears and eyes sharp enough to cut. You try to take comfort in their presence, but the truth is, they don't look half as reassuring as you'd like. If anything, they seem just as unnerved as you are, though they'd rather be caught dead than admit it. Which, you realize, is actually a very real possibility. The air cools quickly, the heat of the day bleeding into a chill that gnaws at your bones. You wrap your arms around yourself and wonder if hypothermia counts as a historically accurate cause of death. Somewhere beyond the wall, an owl hoots, followed by another sound, a howl so long and low it rattles the stones under your feet. Wolves. Or maybe something bigger. Something older. The soldiers stiffen, their heads snapping toward the dark mountains. You half expect one of them to mutter, "Don't worry, this is normal." But of course, no one does. You try lying down against the stone, but it's like trying to sleep on a pile of badly cut bricks. Which you suppose is exactly what it is. Every bump finds a new rib, every edge digs into fresh muscle. Closing your eyes only makes it worse. With your sight gone, your ears stretch to compensate, catching every rustle, every sigh of wind, every crunch of gravel beneath boots you can't see. In the modern world, you complain if your upstairs neighbor plays music at midnight. Here, you complain if your neighbor doesn't scream when the shadows move. One soldier passes by your spot, torchlight illuminating his jaw tight as a trap. He mutters under his breath, and though you don't understand the words, the tone is clear: stay alert. You nod, even though he hasn't spoken to you directly. It's the sort of nod people give when they desperately want to look useful, but actually have no idea what they're doing. If time travel has taught you anything so far, it's that pretending to belong is 90% of survival. You tilt your head back, staring at the sky. Out here, away from the smog and neon of modern cities, the stars look feral. Millions of pinpricks, sharp and wild, crowding the heavens in a way that makes you feel smaller than you already do. And yet, even they don't soothe you. Because under their glow, the wall seems more alive than ever, humming with whispers, as if every stone remembers the hands that bled to place it here. You wonder how many restless souls wander these ridges at night, looking for someone else to join them. Your stomach growls again, which is just rude. After everything you've been through, you'd think it could show a little restraint. A soldier gnaws on a strip of dried meat nearby, and you consider asking for a piece, then think better of it. You've seen the look in his eyes. That's not the look of a man willing to share. That's the look of a man who would stab you for even suggesting it. And so you sit there, hugging your knees, too wired to sleep, too scared to blink. You're just starting to think maybe the worst of it is over when you hear it footsteps. Slow, dragging, coming from the dark side of the wall where no fire burns. You glance around, but none of the soldiers react. No one else seems to hear it. The footsteps scrape closer, deliberate, heavy, like someone carrying a weight they'll never put down. You lean forward, straining your ears. The sound stops. The silence roars. And then, very faintly, you hear it again. this time behind you. If you thought climbing the wall was hard, wait until you discover what stalks it at night. You freeze, every hair on your body standing at attention. The footsteps are close now, uncomfortably close, like someone circling just beyond the reach of the torchlight. You glance toward the nearest soldier, hoping he'll notice, draw his blade, and save you from whatever nightmare is creeping along the stones. But he doesn't move. He just stares into the dark with the same blank expression carved into his face since sundown. Either he hears nothing, or he's trained himself not to care. Neither option feels particularly comforting. The scrape comes again, slow, uneven, like a body dragging one leg. You swallow hard, pulse thundering in your ears. The modern part of your brain screams ghosts aren't real. The historical part whispers back, tell that to the men buried under these stones. You try to stand, but your legs refuse. They've signed a contract with fear, and you are most definitely not in charge anymore. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the sound stops. Silence rushes in to fill the gap, heavier than before. You strain your eyes against the dark, but it's like staring into a black ocean. The torches burn low, their smoke stinging your nose, and for a moment, you convince yourself it was nothing. Just your mind playing tricks. Brains love to do that when there's no Wi-Fi and way too much imagination. You let out a shaky laugh, the kind you hope sounds casual, but instead makes you sound like a lunatic. The soldier glances at you, raises one eyebrow, then looks away. You have never felt judged so efficiently in your entire life. A gust of wind rattles the scaffolding, wooden planks clattering like bones. Somewhere down the slope, dogs bark in frantic bursts before going silent, which is somehow worse than the barking itself. The air feels thicker now, colder, like the wall has shifted from watching to listening. You press your palms against the stone, half expecting to feel a pulse. If it had one, you wouldn't even be surprised. Hours pass, or maybe minutes, it's impossible to tell. Time on the wall doesn't move forward so much as coil around you, squeezing tighter with every breath. Eventually, exhaustion seeps in despite the fear. Your eyelids droop, heavy as lead, and you fight to keep them open. The moment you start to nod off, you hear it again. The dragging step, closer this time, directly behind you. You spin, heart leaping into your throat, and find nothing. Nothing but stone, shadow, and the endless dark stretching into the mountains. But for the briefest second, you swear you see movement. A figure, tall and thin, gone before you can even blink. The soldier nearest you finally speaks. His voice is low, rough, as though dragged from somewhere deep inside his chest. You don't understand the words, but you don't need to. The warning is clear in his tone. Don't follow, don't ask, don't look too long. The footsteps fade. The night grows quiet again, though not peaceful. Never peaceful. And as you sit back down, shivering despite the fire's weak glow, you realize something unsettling. The wall doesn't sleep. Not the stones, not the men, not the things that move when torches burn low. You wonder if it ever has. You hug your knees tighter, listening to the restless wind, and think of home, of soft beds, glowing screens, and nights when the only thing you feared was running out of snacks. Here, on the newborn wall, the darkness itself feels like it wants something from you. Something you're not sure you can give. The stars wheel above, the mountains brood below. And you wait for dawn like a condemned prisoner waiting for the verdict. And as the first pale streaks of morning bleed into the sky, you finally breathe again. You've survived your first night. But if you thought the dark was cruel, wait until you feel what the wall does to men in the burning heat of day, when the work begins again and mercy has no place among the stones. Dawn comes slowly, as if the sun itself is reluctant to rise over this place. First a faint grey smear across the horizon, then streaks of orange and gold bleeding into the night, until at last the world is awake again. The shadows that haunted you for hours retreat, but not without leaving their fingerprints behind. You swear the stones still hum under your fingertips, as though they enjoyed your sleepless terror. Around you, camp stirs. The workers crawl from their tents, moving stiffly, groaning as if they're 90 years old instead of men in their 20s. Some splash cold water on their faces from wooden buckets. Others simply spit dust from their mouths and get on with it. No morning coffee, no lazy scroll through a phone. Just straight into the grind, because the wall doesn't build itself. The soldiers rouse too, though their version of waking up involves barking orders and smacking the nearest unlucky man with a stick. You quickly learn there's no snooze button here. You're either moving or you're bleeding. The air fills with the clatter of wooden bowls, thin porridge ladled out with all the enthusiasm of a tax collector handing out refunds. You get a bowl shoved into your hands, the watery gruel sloshing dangerously close to spilling. It tastes about as exciting as you'd expect, bland, sticky, and carrying faint notes of despair. Still, it's food, and your stomach is too desperate to care. As you eat, the men shuffle toward the slope, already preparing for another day of carrying, lifting, hammering, bleeding. The tools are crude, wooden wheelbarrows that squeal in protest, baskets woven from reeds, ropes frayed and ready to snap. And yet, somehow, it all works. Somehow this empire turns sweat and suffering into something permanent. You join the flow, swept along with the tide of laborers, each man weighed down not just by stone, but by the knowledge that there's no end in sight. The wall stretches endlessly. You could work a lifetime here and still not see it finished. And in a way, that's the point. It isn't just a wall. It's proof that the empires will outlast your body. A cheerful thought for a morning climb. The sun climbs quickly, and with it comes the heat. The air thickens, pressing down on your shoulders like an invisible burden. Sweat returns with a vengeance, trickling into your eyes, stinging as you blink against the glare. The dust, disturbed by hundreds of feet, rises in choking clouds, coating your throat until each breath feels like inhaling sandpaper. You cough, but so does everyone else, so it barely registers. Around here, coughing is less a symptom and more a chorus. You stumble on loose stones, nearly spilling your load, and a soldier barks at you from above. You don't understand the words, but the tone is unmistakable. Don't mess up again. You nod furiously, cheeks burning, and keep moving. Survival tip: never look weak in front of men who think spears are a communication tool. And as miserable as this is, you can't help but compare it to modern life. Back home, you complain about carrying groceries up 3 flights of stairs. Here, men carry the equivalent of a small refrigerator on their backs, up a mountain, while a soldier screams at them for not smiling. It's humbling. And by humbling, of course you mean it makes you want to cry. Still, there's rhythm in it all. The grunt of effort, the thud of stone on stone, the scrape of wood against rock. Voices rise in chants, rough songs sung to keep the pace, the kind of tunes that don't care if you can carry a note. It's not about music. It's about survival through sound. You listen, your own breath falling into the beat, and for a moment you feel less like a stranger and more like part of something vast. Something terrifying, yes, but vast all the same. By mid-morning, your arms ache, your back screams, and you're starting to wonder if your spine has quietly resigned from its duties. Men collapse beside the wall, panting, their skin slick with sweat, while soldiers prod them back to their feet. Rest is a luxury measured in heartbeats. The wall doesn't pause, and neither can you. And just when you think you've reached your limit, someone shouts. A loud, panicked cry, followed by the unmistakable sound of something heavy snapping. The crowd freezes as a rope whips through the air, fraying apart like a snake shedding its skin. A boulder the size of a cartwheel breaks free, tumbling down the slope with bone-crushing speed. Men scatter shouting, some diving into the dirt, others too slow to move. The stone smashes into the ground, spraying shards in every direction. The silence afterward is almost worse than the noise. One man doesn't get up. Another clutches his arm, blood dripping between his fingers. The soldiers glance at the wreckage, mutter something sharp, then bark for the work to continue. No pause. No mourning. The wall eats the fallen and keeps growing. And as you stand there, heart hammering, dust stinging your eyes, you realize something chilling. Accidents here aren't accidents. They're statistics. And you're standing on the wrong side of the equation. If you thought the night on the wall was merciless, wait until you see what happens when men start dropping under the heat and no one stops to help them. The day stretches on, each hour melting into the next like wax under a flame. The sun climbs higher, a merciless overseer that shows no favoritism. It beats down on soldier and worker alike, though only one of those groups gets to swing whips instead of stones. Your clothes cling to you, soaked through with sweat, every fold and seam chafing against your skin until you feel more raw than dressed. The stones you carry have grown heavier, not because they actually gained weight, but because your body has lost the illusion of strength it clung to in the morning. Your arms feel like damp ropes, your knees buckle under each step, and your breath is little more than wheezing dust. It doesn't matter. The wall is patient. It doesn't care if you're exhausted, it only cares that you keep moving until you collapse. And collapse they do. By noon, men start dropping like felled trees. One stumbles, his legs giving out as though he's been cut at the knees, his face slamming into the dirt with a puff of dust. A soldier shouts, jabs him with the butt of a spear, waits for him to rise. He doesn't. The soldier shrugs, waves for two others to drag him aside. There's no ceremony, no tenderness. Just another broken tool removed from the site. The work doesn't pause, not even for the space of a single heartbeat. You want to help. Of course you do. It's human instinct to reach out, to lift a fallen man, to at least give him water. But here, compassion is dangerous currency. Offer it too freely, and you'll be spending your own blood to pay it back. You learn to look away. Everyone does. The wall teaches you quickly that survival isn't about kindness. It's about endurance. The chants grow weaker as the day drags on, voices breaking with fatigue, the songs dissolving into scattered grunts. The stones seem taller, the slope steeper, as if the wall itself has leaned forward to watch you suffer. Every muscle in your body begs you to quit, but there's no quitting here. The wall doesn't allow it. And yet, even in misery, there's absurdity. Somewhere ahead, a man swears loudly as his wheelbarrow tips, spilling its load across the ground. The stones scatter, rolling downhill in slow motion, and every head turns to watch his disaster unfold. He lets out a sound that could either be despair or the laugh of a man who's finally lost his grip on sanity. You almost want to clap, if only because it's the most relatable thing you've seen all day. By mid-afternoon, water becomes the true currency. Buckets are passed, but they're never enough. You dip your hands, slurp greedily, the warm liquid offering only temporary relief before it's gone. Some men fight for it, shoving each other aside. Soldiers intervene when it gets too violent, but most of the time they simply watch. Perhaps they enjoy the spectacle, or perhaps it's a test. Let the weak fight the weak while the wall watches. The smell changes as the heat intensifies. Sweat, of course, but also blood. Sharp, metallic, carried on the dry wind. The stone itself radiates heat, as though it's alive and feeding on the men who crawl across it. Every touch scorches your palms. Every step burns through your soles. And still the stones rise, laid one by one, shaping something that feels less like a wall and more like a tomb built in real time. And then, just as the heat seems unbearable, a cloud drifts across the sun. A collective sigh ripples through the workers, shoulders easing for the briefest moment, faces tilting up to the shade as though it's divine mercy. It lasts only minutes, but in those minutes you feel what passes for hope here. A breeze sweeps over the ridge, cool for once, and you catch yourself smiling like an idiot at a piece of weather. That's how low the bar has fallen. The respite doesn't last. Clouds move, the sun returns, and so does the weight of reality. More men stumble, more bodies are dragged aside, and the wall swallows them all. It doesn't grow smaller for their absence. If anything, it seems larger, hungrier, stretching into the horizon without end. By the time the shadows grow long again, your body is little more than pain held together by stubbornness. You drag your feet back toward the camp, shoulders bowed, head heavy, each step feeling like it belongs to someone else. Around you, others shuffle in silence, their eyes hollow, their faces streaked with dust and sweat. The songs are gone. The laughter, rare as it was, has evaporated. All that remains is the dull rhythm of survival. And as you collapse into the dirt, every bone screaming, every thought blurred, you realize something terrifying. This was just another day. And tomorrow, there will be another, and another, and another. The wall doesn't rest, and neither will you. If you thought the crushing heat was brutal, wait until the storms roll in, when the sky itself seems determined to tear down what men have built. The first warning comes not from the sky, but from the wind. It slithers through camp just before dawn, cool and damp, curling into your bones. You wake to the sound of canvas flapping and ropes straining. the tents twitching like restless beasts. For a moment, you think it's relief, a change from the burning sun. But then you notice the faces of the workers. They aren't smiling, they're wary, they've seen this before. By the time the horizon lightens, the clouds have gathered. Heavy swollen things, bruised purple and black, dragging themselves low across the mountains. They look less like weather, and more like some ancient god leaning down to scowl at humanity's audacity. The wall gleams slick and dark under the early drizzle, stones sweating in anticipation. You shoulder your load anyway, because the soldiers don't care about the sky. They only care about progress. Rain is not an excuse, it's just another hazard. So up the slope you go, stones balanced precariously, while the drizzle thickens into sheets. The dirt beneath your feet transforms instantly into mud, sucking at your sandals, trying to drag you down with every step. Wheelbarrows groan as their wheels sink deep, men cursing as they push against the earth itself. The chants start, softer this time, more desperate than unifying. Voices break in the storm, words carried away by the wind. The rain drums on your back, trickling down your neck, soaking through everything, until you may as well be wearing the river itself. Your hands slip on the stones, slick as ice now. Every step a gamble between strength and gravity. And gravity, as always, is the house that never loses. Ahead of you, a man slips. His foot vanishes into the mud, his weight tips, and the basket on his back flips. The stone inside rolls free, bouncing against others, sparking chaos in seconds. Men scatter, shoving each other aside, the rain disguising tears and sweat alike. The stone thunders past, striking the slope with a wet crunch that no one dares to investigate too closely. Another man stumbles in the mess, face first into the mud. Soldiers shout, waving their arms as if noise could stop momentum. But here's the thing about storms: they don't care about empire, orders, or human vanity. They just keep coming. The wind rises, tearing at your hair, screaming through the half-built wall as if mocking its permanence. The rain comes sideways now, stinging your face like 1,000 tiny whips. The stones themselves groan, mortar washing away in rivulets, joints loosening under the flood. You catch sight of a section further down the ridge, newly built, as it buckles slightly under the weight of water. Not a collapse. Yet, just a reminder that even walls can drown. And as terrifying as it is, you can't help but laugh, just once, a short, delirious sound. Because really, what's more absurd than a project this enormous, this impossible, being undone not by enemy soldiers, but by the weather? Somewhere, in some distant century, someone is probably sipping tea in a cozy house, complaining about their Wi-Fi during a storm. Meanwhile, you're here, carrying half a mountain on your back while lightning cracks overhead like the universe's personal whip. Perspective, right? The soldiers don't share your sense of humor. They shout louder, pushing men harder, as though sheer human stubbornness can outpace the wrath of the sky. And maybe, in a way, it can. Stones still rise, carried inch by inch through the storm, placed into the wall with trembling hands. Every one of them feels like defiance. Fragile, temporary defiance, sure, but defiance nonetheless. Then thunder rolls across the valley, low and long, shaking your ribs. A flash of white sears the sky, and for a split second the world is lit in unnatural daylight. Every face, every raindrop, every trembling stone is caught in stark relief. And in that frozen instant, you understand why people here believe in spirits. The storm doesn't feel like weather, it feels like judgment. And just when you think it can't get worse, the slope beneath your feet shifts. Mud surges downward, carrying baskets, tools, even men. You grab at the wall, fingers clawing into cracks, heart hammering as you dangle on the edge of being swept away. The rain roars louder, drowning every other sound, until all you know is water, stone, and the desperate pounding of your pulse. If you thought the storm was merciless, wait until you see what the night looks like when fire arrives. Not from the sky, but from men who come to tear the wall down. Night falls under the storm's shroud, though you hardly notice the transition. The sky has been black for hours, thunderclouds blotting out moon and stars. Lightning flashes still, painting the world in bursts of ghostly silver, but otherwise it's darkness. The kind that swallows torches before their flames can properly breathe. The rain slackens at last, tapering to a drizzle. The kind that feels like relief until you realize the ground is a battlefield of mud. Every step squelches. sucking at your feet as though the mountain itself is trying to claim you. Camp is quieter than usual, not from rest, but from exhaustion so deep it's almost silence. Men lie sprawled in their tents or in the open, soaked to the bone, too drained to even shiver. The wall looms above, slick and shining, like a serpent coiled along the ridge, daring anyone to challenge it. And then, somewhere beyond the valley, a different kind of thunder rolls. Not from the sky this time, but from men. At first it's faint, hoofbeats maybe, or the pounding of feet on sodden earth. Then you hear shouts, wild and sharp, carried by the wind. Torches flare in the distance, a jagged line of fire weaving through the darkness. Not lightning, not storm, raiders. The soldiers snap awake instantly. Spears rattle, shields are pulled from mud, orders barked so quickly you barely catch their rhythm. Workers stumble upright, wide-eyed, caught between confusion and terror. You don't need translation to understand what's happening. The wall isn't just about labor and stone. It's about defense. And tonight, defense means you. The raiders descend like the storm's second act. Their torches bob and weave, reflections revving on the wet stones. Shouts grow louder, sharper, until they crash against the wall with the force of waves. Arrows whistle through the rain, splattering into the mud, embedding in wood, slicing into flesh. Men scream. Soldiers respond with their own volleys, but their footing is unsteady, their arrows heavy with water. It's chaos, pure, unfiltered chaos. You duck instinctively as a shaft hisses past your ear, burying itself into the ground where your head had been a breath ago. Your stomach flips, your hands claw at the dirt, and for a heartbeat you consider running. Not to fight, not to flee, just to vanish into the night, to escape both the wall and its enemies. But then reality strikes. Where would you go? Out there, into the dark, into the fire. Survival here isn't about choice. It's about enduring whichever side kills you slowest. The raiders climb the slope, mud sucking at their boots, but desperation drives them faster. They hurl fire onto the scaffolding, torches sticking into the wood, flames crackling hungrily. Smoke rises thick and black, mingling with the mist. The smell claws down your throat, burned wood, charred flesh, fear itself turned into something tangible. The wall, so solid a moment ago, suddenly feels fragile, like it could collapse under the weight of men and fire. Soldiers rally at the breach, their cries cutting through the storm's dying growl. Metal clashes in the mud, sparks flying as swords meet in the dark. The workers scatter, some diving into ditches, others pressed into service as shield carriers or stone throwers. You're shoved forward, a rock thrust into your hands, the silent order: clear, fight, or be beaten for cowardice. Your arm trembles as you hurl it down the slope, watching it vanish into the chaos. Did it hit? Did it miss? You'll never know. The night swallows answers whole. And yet, despite the terror, there's a strange energy coursing through you. Adrenaline sharpens the world, the gleam of wet spears, the roar of men, the firelight dancing on stone. You feel alive in the way only danger makes possible. It's absurd, but a tiny part of you thinks, so this is what history really felt like. Not the calm lines in a book, but the heat, the noise, the sheer panic of being here, in the thick of it. You'd trade it for a warm bed in an instant, but still. It's something you'll never forget. Assuming you live, of course. Hours stretch like days. The raiders surge, fall back, surge again, their shouts echoing off the hills. The wall holds, though barely, men gripping the stones as if their lives depend on it, because they do. At last, with the approach of dawn, the fire dims. The attackers, bloodied and exhausted, retreat into the mist, their cries fading into silence. What remains is devastation. The scaffolding smolders, blackened wood dripping ash into the mud. Bodies lie twisted, some still, others groaning, their faces hidden in the muck. Soldiers pace the ridge, barking at survivors, counting losses not in names but in numbers. For them, this was just another night's work. For you, it feels like you've aged 10 years in 10 hours. You collapse beside the stones, chest heaving, the storm's rain replaced by the storm in your veins. The wall stands, but at what cost? And you can't help but wonder, if this is what happens when raiders strike one section, what horrors await when armies come? If you thought a night of fire and blood was brutal, wait until you see how the wall changes in peacetime, when cruelty no longer hides behind storms or enemies, but comes directly from the empire itself. The days after the raid are quieter, but not in the way you'd hope. There's no relief in the silence, only the heavy weight of exhaustion pressing down on every man's shoulders. The storm is gone, the fire is out, and the raiders have vanished into the hills, but the wall is still here, still hungry, and now it demands more than stones. It demands obedience. Work resumes almost immediately, because why wouldn't it? Burned scaffolding is rebuilt, blackened timbers replaced, the slope cleared of ash and corpses, as if the night of blood never happened. There's no mourning, no memorials, just the relentless march of progress. The dead are counted not by names, but by how many fewer bowls of porridge are needed the next morning. The wall doesn't grieve. Neither, apparently, does the Empire. But in peacetime, or what passes for it, something more insidious creeps in. The soldiers' patience thins, their discipline sharpens. Without storms to fight or raiders to repel, they turn their full attention to the men who sweat under their whips. Mistakes that were once ignored in chaos are now punished with frightening creativity. A dropped stone, a spilled basket, a pause to catch your breath, all become crimes against the Empire. And crimes, of course, demand justice. You see it first when a young man, no older than 18, falters. His knees buckle under the weight of a boulder, the stones slipping from his grasp and tumbling into the mud. He scrambles after it, panicked, but the soldier is faster. The boy is dragged upright, slapped hard enough to split his lip, then shoved to his knees. Orders are barked, and 2 men fetch long wooden rods. What follows is not a beating, it's a performance. Every crack of wood on flesh echoes through the camp, a sharp punctuation mark in the damp air. The boy cries out, but not for long. Soon his voice breaks, leaving only ragged gasps. The lesson is clear. The wall is built on blood, and yours can be used for mortar if necessary. The workers don't look away. They watch. They're meant to. Punishment here isn't just about the guilty. It's about terrifying the innocent into obedience. You feel the chill sink into your stomach as you realize it's working. Nobody dares stumble after that. At least, not where soldiers can see. Later that day, another man, older this time with lines carved deep into his face, collapses outright. He doesn't rise, not even when kicked, not even when prodded with the butt of a spear. For a moment, you think he's dead, but the soldiers decide he isn't, and that makes it worse. They haul him toward the wall itself, binding his wrists with rope. Then they lash him to the very stones he was meant to carry. Not for an hour, not for a day, for as long as it takes. He becomes a warning nailed to the Empire's pride, left to bake under the sun, to shiver under the stars, his groans mixing with the wind. Each time you pass that stretch of the wall you hear him. And you know, with absolute certainty, that you could be next. And yet, because humans are ridiculous, you find your brain making strange comparisons. Back home, the worst punishment for slacking off at work is a stern email, or maybe a meeting with your boss where they say things like synergy and team effort. Here, the meeting is with a whip, and synergy means don't die slower than the guy next to you. Suddenly, your 9 to 5 doesn't sound so bad. Still, you can't help but admire the sheer theatricality of it all. The Empire doesn't just punish, it stages punishments like grim operas. The lashings are performed in front of crowds, the executions carried out on high ground where everyone can see. Even the smallest penalty, like being forced to carry double loads, is paraded like a warning flag. The wall isn't just stone, it's theatre. And every worker, soldier, and bystander is part of the audience. The cruelty isn't random either. It's deliberate, methodical, as though written into the blueprints of the wall itself. You start to realize the wall isn't just meant to keep enemies out. It's meant to keep its own people in line. A structure so massive doesn't just defend. It dominates. It says, with every stone this empire will outlast you, whether you obey or not. And somehow, that's more terrifying than any raider or storm. And if you thought being tied to the wall as punishment was cruel, wait until you see the darker solutions. The empire devised for men who tried to escape it altogether. If the daily punishments felt cruel, what happens to those who try to escape feels almost beyond comprehension. Because, of course, some do try. You would too, if every dawn promised another day of carrying boulders until your spine cried for mercy. Men whisper about slipping away under cover of darkness, about vanishing into the hills where the Empire's reach falters. The wall is long, the night is dark. Surely someone could make it. But the Empire thinks of everything. One morning, camp is buzzing with a different kind of tension. Soldiers march through the rows, pulling men from their labor and herding them like livestock toward an open clearing near the wall. You're shoved along too, the crowd pressing tight, until you find yourself staring at a raised platform of stone and timber. It's not scaffolding, it's a stage. At its center kneels a man, thin, ragged, his clothes torn from branches and mud. His face is bruised, his hair matted, but his eyes burn with a kind of wild defiance. You don't need to be told he ran. He ran and was caught, dragged back like a broken animal. The crowd murmurs, shifting uneasily. Everyone here knows what's coming, but no one dares speak it aloud. The soldiers make a show of it. They read out charges in clipped tones, though you doubt the workers understand every word. It doesn't matter. The meaning is clear. Desertion is death. Not just death, but spectacle. Two men step forward carrying long poles tipped with iron. The deserter is forced to stand, his arms bound behind him. He stumbles, bloodied feet dragging through the dirt, until he's positioned in front of the platform. A soldier lifts a sword, glinting in the sun. The deserter doesn't beg. He spits. Not at the soldier, not at the crowd, but at the wall itself. As if to say, I'll die, but you won't own me. The blade falls, clean and swift, and the crowd gasps as one. The body crumples, the head rolls, and the soldiers hold it high like a grim trophy. You expect them to bury the remains, to at least give the man some final dignity. But no, his head is mounted on a pike and raised along the wall, staring out at the horizon. His body is left where it fell, a feast for crows and a lesson for men. The silence afterward is suffocating. No one speaks. No one breathes too loudly. You stare at the head, its expression frozen in something between rage and relief, and you know the Empire got exactly what it wanted. Not just obedience, but fear carved so deep it will echo through your bones long after you leave. The lesson spreads quickly. Men stop whispering about escape. They stop looking too long at the hills. Even their songs change, quieter, more cautious, as though the wall itself is listening. You realize with horror that the Empire doesn't need to chain you. The fear is enough. You're already shackled by your own imagination. And yet some part of you can't help but laugh bitterly. Back home, quitting means walking out of a job. Maybe leaving a passive, aggressive note on your boss's desk. Maybe swiping a few office pens on your way out. Here, quitting means losing your head in front of 1,000 spectators. It makes that awkward HR exit interview look like a dream vacation. The executions don't stop at deserters. Thieves are punished too, often by severing hands, so they can never steal again. Rebels are buried alive in the wall's foundations, their screams muffled under layers of stone. Even rumor mongers, men caught spreading fear or mocking the Empire, vanish overnight, their tents empty by morning. The message is clear. The wall doesn't just keep enemies out. It keeps its own people in check. As you shuffle back to work, the sight of the deserter's head burning in your memory, you begin to realize something chilling. The wall isn't just a structure. It's a machine, and its gears are fed by flesh, fear, and silence. If you thought executions were the most terrifying part, wait until you spend a night hearing the wall's other prisoners. The forgotten souls who were never meant to be seen again, but whose cries still echo in the stones. Night falls differently on the wall. The day brings exhaustion, cruelty, and the grind of labor, but at least the sun lays everything bare. When darkness comes, it feels as though the wall itself exhales, swallowing sounds, bending shadows, and pulling your imagination into places it doesn't belong. The torches sputter, soldiers pace, and somewhere in the endless blackness, you hear things you can't quite explain. At first, you tell yourself it's nothing more than the wind. Wind can be tricky, after all. Sliding through cracks, rattling loose stones, even whistling like a child at play. But then you notice how the sounds don't fade when the wind stops. How they sometimes mimic voices, low and mournful, echoing from within the wall itself. You try to ignore it. You huddle closer to the fire, listen to the snores of your fellow workers, anything to drown it out. But then one night, as you lie staring at the stars, a voice rises above the others. It's not carried on the air. It's inside the stone. Let me out. You jolt upright, heart-pounding eyes scanning the camp. No one else stirs. They don't hear it. Or maybe they've learned not to react. Slowly, you press your hand to the cold wall beside your bedroll. It vibrates faintly beneath your fingers, like something alive, like something moving just out of reach. By dawn, you tell yourself it was a dream. But the soldiers seem to know. They march with a certain smugness, their eyes gleaming when men glance nervously at the wall. And then, over breakfast of rice gruel, you hear whispers from the older workers. Not rumors, confessions. They bury them inside, one mutters, staring into his bowl. Rebels, thieves, men who defied the empire. Sometimes whole families. He doesn't raise his voice, doesn't even blink. They become the wall. Another man shushes him, darting glances toward the guards. But it's too late. The seed is planted, and now you can't unsee it. You picture the workers who vanished, the ones whose tents lay empty in the morning. You picture the holes in the wall you've seen filled with stones and mortar. How easy it would be to slide a body inside, to close it up forever. You picture their faces, their mouths open in silent screams that the wind carries out centuries later. It explains the sounds. It explains the soldiers' smirks. It explains why no one else flinches when they hear cries at night. They know. Suddenly, every stone feels like a grave marker. Every step you climb feels like you're walking across ribs and skulls. And the terrifying thing is, you realize that's not poetic exaggeration. It's the truth. You catch yourself laughing nervously, the kind of laugh that comes when fear corners you and reason takes a back seat. Imagine this at your apartment complex. You're walking past the foundation and someone casually tells you, "Oh yeah, the landlord bricked up a few tenants who couldn't pay rent. Don't mind the tapping. It's just Larry from 3B, eternally late with the check." Suddenly your noisy neighbors don't sound so bad. As the days stretch on, you begin to notice more. The faint smell of rot beneath the tang of lime mortar. The way certain stones are darker, rougher, as though hiding secrets no hand dared smooth. The soldiers don't speak of it, but their eyes tell you enough. They know, and they enjoy your discomfort. Fear is the Empire's most efficient tool. A man who fears the wall he builds will never dare to abandon it. But the cruelest part isn't what's entombed in the wall, it's how the Empire twists it into devotion. Priests arrive some evenings, chanting rituals, telling workers that the buried are sacrifices, their spirits now guardians of the Empire. The idea spreads like mold. The wall is not just stone, it is alive, fed by flesh and loyalty. Some workers even start leaving offerings, bits of food, scraps of cloth, whispered prayers, as though bribing the dead to stay quiet. You can't decide which is worse, that they believe it, or that you're starting to too. Because sometimes, when you press your ear against the wall, you don't just hear cries. You hear whispers that sound like promises. Promises that they're still watching. Promises that you're next. If you thought the buried dead were disturbing, wait until you see what happens when the wall itself becomes a stage for the living sacrifices. The punishments designed not just to kill, but to humiliate, terrify, and remind every soul here of their place. By now, you've accepted the wall is more than stone. It's bones, breath, and whispers. But the Empire isn't content with burying the dead in its foundations. Sometimes, it feeds the living to it too, slowly, publicly, with all the ceremony of a holiday festival. It begins on a blistering afternoon, when the air feels thick enough to drink, and the dust burns your nostrils. Soldiers round everyone up again, pulling you from your work, herding you like sheep into the shadow of the wall. At first you think another deserter has been caught. Your stomach knots, ready for another head to roll. But this time, the soldiers drag out 3 men, alive, bound hand and foot, their faces swollen from beatings. One has a crooked nose and eyes that burn with fury. Another looks dazed, muttering half-formed prayers. The third, he's trembling, eyes darting wildly, a boy really, too young to have grown a beard. Whatever they've done, the punishment will be worse than death. You can feel it. The soldiers lash them to wooden frames, each one upright, each one angled just so against the wall's face. The crowd presses closer, curiosity fighting horror. Then the soldiers take out iron chisels and begin carving holes in the stone. Shallow at first, then deeper, jagged mouths yawning open. The prisoners scream when they realize what's happening. They are being sealed in. Stone by stone, mortar by mortar. The wall swallows them whole. You hear bones scrape as the men thrash. You hear muffled shouts turn into gurgling sobs. The boy begs for his mother until the sound chokes off under wet cement. The soldiers laugh as they work, slapping each other's backs, mocking the prisoners' cries. And then there's silence. 3 more voices added to the wall's choir. You'd think the workers would revolt, that this horror would ignite fury. But it doesn't. It freezes everyone. You can see it in their faces. This is a warning sharper than swords. If the wall can devour those 3, it can devour anyone. No one dares disobey. Not when the punishment isn't just death, but becoming part of the very thing you're forced to build. The Empire has created the perfect trap. Men are too terrified to run, too broken to fight, too haunted to hope. You find yourself thinking about modern punishments. Fines. Jail. Maybe some community service where you pick up trash in a neon vest while people drive by and honk. Now picture explaining this to your parole officer. Yeah, I jaywalked. They sealed me into a mile-long stone wall for eternity. My bad. Suddenly that parking ticket doesn't sting quite so much. Nights after the sealing, the camp is restless. Workers toss and turn, whispering to each other, though never about what they saw. No one dares say the word out loud, as though naming it might summon the wall's appetite. But the truth hangs heavy in the silence. The wall isn't just a monument of labor. It's a monument of fear. The smell of wet mortar clings to your clothes. The echo of the boys' screams clings to your dreams. And now, when the wind moans through the stones, you swear it carries their voices, angry, pleading, unfinished. You begin to wonder if the Empire wanted that too. A haunted wall is still a wall, after all. Fear doesn't just build it, it maintains it. And yet, just when you think the cruelty has peaked, you hear of a different punishment. One not about sealing men in, but about dangling them out. Because the Empire doesn't only bury the disobedient in its wall. Sometimes, it hangs them from it, letting the vultures and the horizon do the rest. If the wall was a prison by day and a tomb by night, then at times it also served as a theatre, and not the kind with comedy or dancing girls. This was the Empire's stage, and the actors were chosen unwillingly. You wake one morning to the sound of drums, not the soft roll of military rhythm, but sharp, jagged beats that make the air feel brittle. Something is happening. The workers are herded once more, torches in daylight, banners unfurled, soldiers' armor clanking like a warning bell. At first, you think another sealing is about to take place, and your stomach tightens. But when you see the scaffold rising from the top of the wall itself, tall beams stretching out against the pale sky, you realize this will be something different. The condemned are already waiting. 3 of them again, bound, stripped to the waist, their bodies bruised and broken from interrogation. One is said to be a bandit captured in the hills. Another, a soldier who stole rations. The third, no one even knows, only that he angered the wrong official. Justice here doesn't need reasons, only examples. They are led up onto the wall, and you, along with hundreds of workers, crane your necks to see. Soldiers push them against the beams, securing their arms with ropes, until they dangle over the wall's edge. From below they look like strange, broken ornaments. Bodies swaying slightly in the breeze, faces pale against the endless sky. And then the real cruelty begins. They are left there. Not for minutes, not for hours, but for days. Their cries echo down the wall's stones, muffled and ragged as thirst burns their throats. Birds circle overhead, swooping closer each day. Drawn by the scent of sweat, blood, and despair, workers avert their eyes, but you can't help stealing glances. You see the bandit spit curses until his voice cracks. You see the soldier whimper, begging for water that never comes. You see the nameless man slump into silence, his body limp but still dangling like a warning flag. The message is clear: the wall does not forgive. It displays. It teaches. It turns suffering into spectacle, as if to say, look here and remember your place. You can't help but draw a modern comparison, absurd as it is. Today, a public shaming might mean your boss calling you out in an all-staff email, or your friend tagging you in an embarrassing photo on social media. Back then, your embarrassing photo is your actual body rotting above the heads of your co-workers while vultures pick at your ribcage. Hard to beat that for a bad day at the office. What makes it worse is how quickly everyone adjusts. After a few days, the dangling bodies don't draw gasps or murmurs. They simply blend into the landscape, like an extension of the wall itself. Workers file past them on their way to the next stretch of stone, barely glancing up. It hits you then. This is exactly what the Empire wants. To make horror ordinary. To make cruelty background noise. To make people forget that this isn't how life is supposed to be. At night, the silhouettes of the hanging men stretch across the ground like grotesque shadows. You lie awake staring at them, wondering how long before they drop, how long before another body takes their place. You wonder if, centuries from now, people will stand here and see only stone, never knowing the screams that once echoed across it. And then, just when you think the Empire has wrung every drop of dread from the wall, you hear about something even more unsettling: punishments, not meant for deserters or thieves, but for women. Because, as you're about to learn, the wall had its own cruel way of reminding the women who lived and labored near it of their place too. If the wall punishes men with whips, stones, and ropes, it punishes women with shame. Not always bloody, not always fatal, but sharp, public, unforgettable. You wouldn't expect it at first. Women here don't build the wall the way men do. They aren't forced to haul stones until their backs bend, at least not officially. But they live in the camps, cook the food, wash the clothes, raise the children who will one day replace their fathers on the wall. And the Empire makes sure they, too, know the cost of stepping out of line. You see it one afternoon, as the sun bakes the dust into hard clay. A woman is dragged into camp by soldiers, her arms bound, her hair ripped loose from its knot. She is accused of stealing grain from the storehouses, though no one can say whether it's true. Perhaps she took a handful for her starving child. Perhaps she was simply unlucky enough to catch the eye of the wrong guard. Here, guilt doesn't matter. What matters is the performance. The punishment is humiliation. They strip her to the waist before the workers, jeering as she tries to cover herself. Her face burns redder than the sun. Then comes the flogging, thick lashes that tear her skin, each crack echoing like thunder along the wall. She screams, and the sound carries down the stones, mingling with the voices of the buried and the dangling. But this is not about her alone. This is about every wife, every daughter, every sister watching, silently promising themselves they will obey. Later, you learn that women accused of adultery face even crueler fates. Some are paraded before the camp with shaved heads, mocked as their children cry. Others are locked in cages suspended from the wall itself, their shame visible for miles. Death is not always the punishment, it's the spectacle of living with dishonor. The Empire knows that in many ways, humiliation cuts deeper than blades. And yet, life goes on around these displays. Workers shuffle past, eyes low. Children are shushed when they stare too long. Meals are eaten, stones lifted, walls built higher. The cruelty is not an interruption. It's woven into the rhythm of the place. It reminds you disturbingly of how today, scandals trend online for a few days before disappearing under the next wave of outrage. Only here, the hashtags are screams, and the likes are soldiers laughing. You lie awake that night, replaying the woman's cries. The wall looms nearby, blotting out the stars, and for the first time you realize it doesn't just imprison men. It imprisons families, generations, entire communities. Its stones are heavy with not just the dead, but with the humiliation of the living. And if you think shame and spectacle are the worst the wall had to offer, wait until you witness the Empire's most twisted invention of all punishments, designed not just for the body, but for the mind. Slow, psychological tortures that break a person long before death claims them. By now, you've seen whips carve backs, stones entomb the living, and ropes dangle men above the horizon. You've watched humiliation do its work, turning shame into a sharper blade than steel. But the Empire is cleverer still. Sometimes, it doesn't need to spill a drop of blood to destroy a man. Sometimes, all it needs is silence, isolation, and a carefully measured dose of despair. It begins innocently enough, a small cell built into the wall, barely wider than your shoulders, barely tall enough to kneel in. Workers whisper about these holes, hidden behind false stones. Some call them storage rooms for tools. Others know better. They are prisons of the mind, where men are stuffed and forgotten, not killed, not whipped, Not even sealed completely, just left there to rot slowly in darkness. You hear about one man who had been caught plotting to run away. Instead of a quick death, he was shoved into such a space with nothing but a bowl of water. Day and night blurred together, no light, no sound but his own breathing. After a week, when soldiers dragged him out, he no longer spoke. His eyes darted like a hunted animal's, his hair had fallen in clumps, and he flinched at the touch of daylight as though it burned. He was alive, technically, but the man he had been was gone. The wall had hollowed him out and left only the shell. Another punishment is subtler, yet equally cruel. Food deprivation is common, but the Empire learned that starving men too quickly robbed them of their suffering. So instead, they ration hope. A prisoner is given just enough to survive, but never enough to thrive. Days stretch into weeks of gnawing hunger, bones visible beneath skin, until the prisoner begins to envy the dead. The guards laugh as they toss him scraps. Like feeding a dog they don't care about, but don't quite want to see die. And then there are the noises. Sometimes, prisoners are locked in cells close enough to the main camps that they can hear life carrying on. Hammers striking stone, men laughing, women singing lullabies to their children. That more than whips or hunger is what breaks them. To be close enough to touch life but forever barred from it. To hear joy while choking on misery. To know that the world doesn't stop for your suffering. It keeps marching and leaves you behind. You can't help but think of the modern equivalent, sensory deprivation tanks. Solitary confinement, the ways we still toy with the mind to punish. Imagine spending a week without your phone, without Netflix, without even the dull comfort of doom scrolling on social media. Now strip away not just the distraction, but all light, all sound, all sense of time. Suddenly that one boring afternoon when the Wi-Fi went down feels like a spa retreat compared to this. The cruel genius of these punishments is that they don't make martyrs. A man executed becomes a story. A man broken slowly becomes a warning. The Empire doesn't just want obedience. It wants submission, the kind that echoes long after the body collapses. And with every whisper of these punishments, the wall grows taller, heavier, more impossible to resist. But the wall's cruelties weren't always designed in silence. Some of its most dreadful punishments were carried out under the open sky, where the condemned became entertainment, where torture became a kind of festival, and the wall transformed into an arena of suffering you'll never forget. If the hidden cells were designed to break a man in silence, the public tortures were designed to break everyone else in noise. They weren't private acts of punishment, but performances, rituals of cruelty carried out under the open sky, where hundreds of eyes would watch and learn the lesson written in blood. You remember the first time you see it. The drums beat again, faster this time, like the pulse of the Empire itself. Soldiers march through the camp, dragging a man whose face is unrecognizable from bruises. His crime? Theft, though rumor says it was just a handful of grain. Perhaps he was hungry, perhaps he wasn't. What mattered was that the wall needed a reminder of its power. The soldiers drag him up onto a platform, set against the wall's base. People gather quickly, pressed shoulder to shoulder, mothers clutching children, men shifting uneasily, everyone pretending they don't want to watch even as they do. Because curiosity always wins, even when it makes you sick. The condemned is tied to a wooden crossbeam, his arms spread wide, his body trembling under the sun. Then the executioner steps forward with iron rods heated red in the fire. The crowd hushes. You hear the sizzle before you smell the burning flesh. The man howls, twisting against his bonds, while soldiers laugh and jeer. It's not about killing him. It's about displaying his pain like a banner, a warning that sears itself into memory. The torture lasts for hours. Every time he faints, they splash water on him to wake him again. Children cry, women cover their faces, but no one leaves. Leaving would look like disobedience. Everyone stays, everyone watches, everyone learns. And in the end, when the man finally goes still, the silence that follows is even heavier than his screams. But not all public punishments are fiery. Some are slow, almost theatrical in their design. One of the most feared is lynching. Death by 1,000 cuts. You don't see it yourself, but the whispers are enough to make your skin crawl. They say the condemned is strapped upright, while the executioner slices away flesh in careful pieces. Bit by bit, until nothing remains but blood, bone, and terror. And all the while, the crowd cheers, not because they want to, but because silence might be mistaken for sympathy. Standing there, part of the crowd, you feel the sick genius of it. These punishments aren't just about the person suffering. They're about everyone else. Each cry, each drop of blood, each grotesque display is meant to brand obedience onto the minds of those watching. And it works. You find yourself lowering your eyes more often, moving more quickly when a soldier shouts, holding your breath when one walks too close. The Empire doesn't need to whip you personally, it just needs to show you what happens to the unlucky few. You can't help but smirk bitterly, imagining a modern version. Today, punishment might be community service painting over graffiti, sweeping sidewalks. Maybe sitting through a mandatory seminar on ethics while sneaking glances at your phone. Back then, the seminar is a live demonstration of someone's flesh being sliced into ribbons, while you're forced to take notes with your memory. Suddenly, a PowerPoint lecture doesn't sound so bad. By nightfall, the wall looms taller than ever in your mind, not just a structure, but a stage where suffering is rehearsed and replayed until it becomes normal. And just when you think you've seen the worst of it, a whisper reaches you from the older workers that the wall's punishments weren't only for enemies of the Empire, but for its own soldiers too. Because even those who enforced the rules weren't safe from its shadow. The soldiers who patrolled the wall always seemed untouchable. Iron helmets gleaming, spears sharp, voices booming with orders no one dared disobey. To the workers, they were gods of discipline. The men who could reduce a life to nothing with a single word. But power on the Great Wall was never one-directional. The Empire had a way of reminding even its guardians that they were disposable, and nothing carved that lesson deeper than the punishment soldiers faced when they faltered. It begins innocently enough, or so you think. One winter morning, while frost still bites the stones, a soldier stumbles during the inspection. His armor isn't fastened properly. His spear leans against the wall instead of resting upright. A trivial mistake, you think. But the captain notices, and in this world, there is no such thing as trivial. The punishment is immediate public humiliation. The soldier is stripped of his armor and forced to kneel in the cold while the others march past, staring straight ahead, pretending not to see. His face burns brighter than the frostbite creeping into his hands. The captain circles him slowly, explaining in booming tones that discipline is the lifeblood of the Empire. One loose buckle could mean the collapse of the wall. One soldier's weakness could bring a horde of enemies pouring through. The crowd of workers, dragged to watch, nods silently, knowing the speech isn't really for the soldier, it's for them. But humiliation is the soft edge of the blade. The hard edge comes later. Another day, a soldier is caught drinking rice wine smuggled from a nearby village. The Empire has no patience for drunkenness on the wall. When the discovery is made, the punishment feels almost theatrical. The man is lashed to a post at the base of the wall, his own comrades ordered to whip him until his back is nothing but a red, glistening map. Every strike echoes like a drumbeat, each one reminding the onlookers that the wall tolerates no weakness, not even from those sworn to defend it. And here's the cruel twist. It is often soldiers themselves who are ordered to punish their own brothers. Loyalty is tested not in combat but in cruelty. To refuse would be treason. To comply is to wound your own kin. Imagine a workplace today where your boss catches your co-worker sneaking snacks and then orders you to slap them across the face in front of HR. Ridiculous, sure. But on the wall, it was survival. And unlike the office, the slaps drew blood. The punishments grow darker the longer you linger. There's the story of the deserters. Soldiers who fled the monotony and hunger, trying to vanish into the villages beyond. They rarely made it far. When caught, they were brought back not for a quiet death, but for a spectacle. The execution was meant to poison the hearts of any who might be tempted to follow. Deserters were sometimes buried alive within the wall itself, their bodies becoming part of the very stones they tried to escape. The wall holds us all, one old worker mutters beside you. You're not sure if he's speaking metaphorically, or if he's remembering a time he heard muffled screams under the bricks. Other soldiers met their end more brutally. You hear whispers of men boiled alive in great iron cauldrons for treachery, Their flesh turned to steam while the wall swallowed the sound. Or beheadings. Done quickly but staged ceremoniously, the head displayed on spikes along the battlements for weeks at a time. You walk by one such grim display one morning, the eyes already hollow, the mouth frozen mid-protest. A crow perches on the skull, pecking absently, as though the Empire itself has delegated clean-up duty to the birds. And yet soldiers endured it, stayed in line, and barked their orders louder. Fear welded them together more tightly than camaraderie ever could. They lived with the knowledge that their spears pointed outward toward enemies, but also inward, at themselves. The wall was not just a fortress against Mongols or raiders, it was a fortress against disobedience. You find yourself studying them differently after this. The swaggering steps, the shouted commands. They all look like armor now, not of bronze, but of fear. You notice how they glance nervously at their captains, how their laughter around the fire is clipped. Never too loud, never too reckless. They live on the same knife edge as the workers, only with sharper blades waiting if they slip. And in the quiet of night, you hear them whisper too. Tales of soldiers ordered to carry out brutal executions, only to be executed themselves for carrying out those orders too eagerly. Tales of men who were promoted one week and flayed alive the next for some invisible offense. The wall doesn't reward loyalty, it devours it. Think about it. In the modern world, a bad day at work might get you a stern email, maybe a warning, or if your boss is in a particularly bad mood, a pink slip. But on the Great Wall, a bad day might literally get you slipped into a pit and covered in stones. Suddenly, performance reviews in open plan officers don't sound so terrible. At least nobody's boiling you alive for missing a deadline. As dawn breaks after one particularly grim execution, you walk along the wall's battlements, the stones cold underfoot. Below, the workers shuffle to their posts, their eyes heavy with exhaustion. Beside you, soldiers tighten their armor, their faces expressionless. And for a moment, you realize they are not so different. Both worker and soldier are trapped here, both bound by fear, both living at the mercy of a system that demands sacrifice. One swings a hammer, the other a sword, but both know the same truth. The wall takes more than it ever gives. And yet, the Empire still demands more. If workers and soldiers alike can be punished, who then is safe? You wonder, until you hear whispers of a darker truth, that the cruelty didn't stop at the wall's edge. Even emperors themselves, seated on their thrones of jade, lived in fear of the machine they created. Because what good is building the greatest wall on earth, if even the one who commands it cannot escape its shadow? You might think the one person spared from the Great Wall's cruelty was the emperor himself. After all, he was the one who ordered it, the one whose word turned entire landscapes into battlegrounds of stone and sweat. Surely he could recline in silk robes, sipping tea, while thousands of nameless hands built his dream. But the higher the throne, the colder the air. And for the emperor, fear was thicker than the mortar that bound the wall. Imagine sitting in a palace so vast, you could get lost on the way to your own bedchamber. Servants bow in every direction, eunuchs scurry with reports, and generals kneel with maps unfurled across the floor. To outsiders, you are heaven's chosen son, a man whose will shapes the land. But inside, you know the truth: one poisoned cup, one whispered plot, and you're finished. The wall wasn't just to keep invaders out. It was to keep the emperor's paranoia at bay. He couldn't sleep without guards outside every door. He didn't eat unless tasters swallowed first. Every visitor was a potential assassin, every letter a possible trap. The irony. He was protected by soldiers who feared him. But those same soldiers also feared the punishments he invented. Fear built the wall, and fear guarded the throne. It was a cycle no one could escape. Not even the man at the top. You picture him late at night, pacing among the lacquered screens of his chamber, the flicker of oil lamps casting shadows that move like ghosts. Outside the palace walls, thousands are dying to raise stones in his name. Inside, he is haunted by the thought that the next shadow could be his killer. What good is an empire if you can't walk through your own gardens without glancing over your shoulder? And yet, emperors doubled down. Qin Shi Huang, the first to truly weld the wall into being, famously sent men to hunt for elixirs of immortality. He feared death so much he swallowed concoctions of mercury, believing they'd grant eternal life. Instead, They burned him from the inside out. The wall stood tall, but the emperor rotted behind it. A lesson in irony: if ever there was one, build the longest wall in the world, yet fail to guard yourself from your own medicine cabinet. Think about that the next time someone in your office microwaves fish for lunch. It's not poison, but it might feel like it. At least you won't drop dead from the fumes. Qin Shi Huang wasn't so lucky. The truth is, the emperor's life was a gilded cage. The wall was his crowning achievement, but it was also a monument to his fear. Each stone cried out not only against the threat of nomads, but against the terror inside his own heart. He wanted to be remembered as a god among men. But centuries later, his story is whispered more with pity than awe. A man who ruled millions but could never rule himself. And here you are, standing atop the wall centuries later in this journey, looking out across its endless spine. It stretches beyond sight, vanishing into haze, just as the emperor's dreams did. You can almost hear the whispers of workers, soldiers, even the emperor himself, all folded into the mortar of history. The wall was never just stone. It was sweat, blood, screams, paranoia, ambition, and the bitter taste of fear. And yet it still stands, a reminder that human hands can build wonders, but also prisons. If you lean close, press your palms against the ancient bricks, you might feel it. The heartbeat of everyone who lived and died here. And maybe, just maybe, the faint echo of an emperor whispering into the dark, asking whether any wall is high enough to keep death out.